Greetings. I'm Ryan Hamilton, Government Relations Associate for the Minnesota Catholic Conference. Today's stop in our 2022 Faithful Citizenship Tour brings us to Senate District 41. And I've caught up with Mr. Tom Dippel. Tom is a candidate to represent this district in the Minnesota State Senate. He's on the ballot this November. So I'm here to ask him a few questions, get to know him. As you know, because of redistricting, all of our aspiring legislators are running in new districts. So we're here to learn about these candidates and inform our vote for November. So I'll just jump right in and get to know our candidate. Thanks for being with us today, Tom.
My pleasure.
Yeah, and so what motivated you to pursue this avenue of service? Why are you running for the state legislature?
Sure. So my wife and I sat down and talked about this initially under the wisdom and great advice of some friends, and we were concerned about the future of the state for our children. We have 6 kids.
Oh, wow.
And we actually homeschool our children as well. And we're just generally concerned about their future. We want them to have the same opportunities that we've been able to have. We want them to grow up in a safe environment in Minnesota as well, where they can practice their faith, where we can practice our faith as well, and where we can educate them to a standard that is appropriate to get them ready for their future.
So we understand that door knocking is a big part of campaigning for this type of office. What are you hearing from the voters at the doors, and how does that align with what you've just talked about and what you hope to accomplish as a member of the legislature?
Absolutely. So there really are 3 big issues that you hear about at the doors. You hear about the economy. People are really concerned about inflation. And you hear about crime, especially in this area, the suburb, Cottage Grove, Hastings, parts of Lake Elmo and Afton areas have been hit by crime also. And so that is a big issue of being able to support our police and make sure that criminals are adjudicated through the criminal justice system. And then education is a big issue. Education has been a very big issue for constituents down in Hastings this last election cycle, and likewise in Cottage Grove, Afton, Lake Elmo, the surrounding areas here, all the way up to Grant. People are very concerned about education and the educational standards that unfortunately are falling right now in public schools.
Right. So unlike many advocacy groups, the Catholic Church's voice does not fit into any typical political distinctions. We do not speak as Republicans, we don't speak as Democrats, nor are we a single issue advocacy group. We speak to a broad variety of topics considered by lawmakers in St. Paul. So my question is, if elected, you will be entering into a highly partisan, often tribal environment. How do you plan to overcome partisanship in the policymaking process?
I think that one way to overcome partisanship is by following the United States Constitution and the Minnesota Constitution. This gives us a legal framework to work within, and it narrows the scope of what government can and cannot do. If we respect the rule of law, then we understand that the purview of government is limited to a certain extent in our lives. And I believe that freedom and liberty are very popular ideas for the American people and the people in this district. And so when we move forward with different policies, that's what we aim to be grounded in, is the rule of law, the principles of freedom and liberty that the country is founded on.
Great. Moving into some more specific issues that are of concern to Minnesota Catholics and our bishops. According to Catholic social doctrine, the family is the foundational building block of society. Now that view runs contrary to what we're seeing in modern secular society, which is leaning towards prioritizing the individual or prioritizing the state. Child rearing, you mentioned you have 6 kids, has never been easy or cheap, and it has only become more arduous with the rising costs of living, things like transportation, the inflation, consumer goods, and all those things have skyrocketed. And so there's a growing perception that marriage and parenthood are becoming a privilege. only for those of great financial means or favorable circumstances. And that perception is sustained by what we're seeing in the numbers, steady declines in the marriage rates and family formation amongst the middle and working classes. So, do you agree that despite its vital role, the family as an institution is being taken for granted of or even neglected?
I do agree that that is the case, and I believe that there are people with certain philosophies, whether it be political or otherwise, that want to undermine families so they can more easily usher in their political beliefs. And that, of course, runs contrary to who I am and what I believe. Obviously, with 6 children, I've been married to my wife for 14 years, and I think to give our children and the future children the best opportunity, a stable home, a loving mother and father, and a family grounded in core moral principles is fundamental for the stability of our families and our society.
Sure. To go deeper into that, what are some strategies that we all can employ to elevate the status of the family in our politics, in our media, in our culture? How can society better support families in what you've described, their moral roles and responsibilities?
Yeah. Well, I'm always hesitant to try to have the state enforce anything of that nature. I do think that our churches, our communities, we're part of a homeschool co-op as well, where not only do our children learn at home, but they also go to a co-op where they have tutors. And so within communities, when you have community, you have a support structure and you have a system in which people can help one another and also glean wisdom from one another and how best to help one another in a family situation. So I think that lays a foundation for sure within our churches, within our communities. And then beyond that, I do believe that when the state institutes policies that separate families, that's a negative. So there is an issue, shared parenting, that comes up a lot, where divorce unfortunately does happen in families, and so we need to understand what is the best outcome for the child within that. Well, we know that families that have a mother and a father, children that have a mother and father present with them thrive more. Statistically, this is what is shown. So I do believe that within the shared parenting realm, when a divorce does occur, whether unfortunate or not, both parents should have an equal right to the children at the outset, and then it should be proven through the justice system whether or not one should have less than the other. Unfortunately, right now it's biased, and I do believe that certain families aren't given the opportunity, or certain parents aren't given the opportunity to equally parent their child after a divorce. So in the unfortunate inevitability that divorce will continue, I think the best case outcome is that both parents have equal rights to parent their child and have time with their child.
Sure. And so along those lines, you kind of touched on it, but what role does the legislature play in creating the conditions for parents, especially those raising minor children, to thrive?
Yeah, like I said,
the appropriate role of the legislature.
Absolutely. Yep, I'd reiterate that I think when the state intervenes with the family is the core of the community, really. And if you're for, the family, I don't think that the government should intervene with the family in their choice of raising their children, unless there's abuse, of course. Then the state certainly has a role in protecting a child and bringing justice in that circumstance. So I do believe that Minnesota has very favorable laws towards, for instance, homeschooling, which has been on the rise because of the COVID shutdowns, and parents chose to continue to homeschool their children or make whatever educational system choice that they want. So again, I trend in the direction of giving the parents the freedom and the choices to make the best decision for their family. Absolutely.
So moving towards promoting healthy households, workplaces, and schools. In conjunction with advocating for policies that promote family formation, our bishops are actively opposed to the legalization, the normalization, and commercialization of vice activities and substances that have been proven to undermine the family. Do you support or oppose legalizing online sports gambling? And if you could share your reasoning.
Yeah. So I'm a little torn on that because, again, I trend towards giving people freedom.
Sure.
However, my personal view is I don't gamble. It isn't something that I personally support or endorse. However, within the realm of freedom and liberty that I think is afforded to us in the United States Constitution and in part in the Minnesota Constitution, there is room for gambling to occur. And I believe that some items, if kept illegal, are unregulated and continue to occur, though aren't out in the open to be able to deal with appropriately.
Sure.
And so, again, I trend towards giving people that freedom, and I do believe that our churches and communities should reach out and help people that may be struggling with an addiction in that area. And so, yeah, generally speaking, I think freedom is the appropriate measure, but also, my personal conviction is that I don't believe that gambling is a wise choice.
Sure. And along those similar lines, would you support or oppose the legalization and commercialization of recreational marijuana in Minnesota?
Yeah, and it's about the same. So I actually had a partial history of drug abuse when I was in high school with marijuana, and I became a Christian when I was 20 and a half, and that completely changed the way that I viewed life and a lot of these issues. However, what I realized was this stuff continues to grow in black market, underground market, if you will, and I do believe that making something legal and regulated brings it to light. So again, whether it be churches, communities, law enforcement can deal with it more in the open and in a regulatory environment rather than a black market environment where all the money and all the resources that are gained from those illegal sales go to very shady characters. And so, again, it's an issue of freedom and liberty, but also regulatory and the role of the church, the community, and the surrounding area to work through and deal with the issue.
So moving on to supporting motherhood and women's health in the light of the Dobbs decision that came out this summer. Catholics hold that life is sacred from conception until natural death, and that people at every stage of life, even those in the womb, should be respected, protected, and loved. Given that the overturning of Roe versus Wade is not the end, it's just the beginning, abortion is still legal in our state. Minnesota Catholics believe we must cultivate a civilization of love that cares for both the mother and the child before and after birth. Now more than ever, we must create a policy environment where babies are respected in the law and women are not led to believe that abortion is the only option. How do you think we can best support mothers before, during, and after childbirth?
I think, again, I go back to the fundamental role of the community and the church, but I also believe that crisis pregnancy centers, or just pregnancy centers in general, are critical. I know that seeing a child in their own womb, a mother certainly comes to the understanding and realization that this is my baby, this is a child, this isn't just a ball of cells. And so I, as a Christian, do believe that life begins at conception, And I believe that all of the genetic evidence that we have, the vast amounts of information in our DNA that stretch from here to the moon and back, and even beyond that, the intricacies of human life are truly amazing and astounding. And so that definitely should be protected. And then going back to the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution of the United States and our state, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness can't be pursued if a life is terminated. And so since that is a right under the rule of law within not only our country but our state, I think that should be protected and upheld to the utmost. And if we don't protect life and stand for life, then certainly all the parenting and all the other ideas that we just talked about come to nothing if life doesn't exist.
Moving on to the dignity of life until natural death, we live in an age of highly advanced medical knowledge and technology that has enabled us to significantly extend life and has bestowed many blessings for healthier communities. At the same time, such progress has enabled a throwaway culture, such as the legalization of physician-assisted suicide. And that targets and devalues people who most deserve our assistance and compassion, those with disabilities, the elderly, and low-income individuals. For Catholics, physician-assisted suicide is completely contrary to the dignity of the human person. Legalization of physician-assisted suicide unnaturally hastens death when it's thought that a person's life no longer has meaning or purpose. Again, the throwaway culture. Public policy should focus on ways to prioritize compassionate alternatives to physician-assisted suicide, such as hospice and palliative care. And we shouldn't force medical professionals to prescribe lethal drugs, and that undermines the patient-provider relationship. So my question is, would you support our efforts to ensure that physician-assisted suicide remains unthinkable because we as a state have enacted policy choices that promote accessible, holistic, and dignified end-of-life care?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and I think this follows in the same vein as the life conversation. If we don't protect life, if we don't respect life and hold life in the highest regard, then anything else around us could be justified as being greater than life, and terrible things have been done in past history when life is degraded and people are segregated out into groups and said to be less valuable. We're all created in God's image. We all have equal and definitive value because of that, and so life should be protected definitively.
Final question, or line of questioning, support getting to education, which you mentioned earlier. Many children in low-income families are trapped in underperforming schools, as families are not able to afford to choose a school that meets their child's needs. Do you agree with the principle that all parents should be given a choice to send their children to whatever school meets their family's needs, and that education resources coming from the state through tax dollars should follow students rather than bureaucratic systems?
Absolutely, and I do believe clearly I homeschool my children, and we still pay taxes as though we send our children to public school. And I know that a lot of families would like to either homeschool, send their children to a different school district, send their children to a private school, etc. And I do believe the money should follow the child. Minnesota, in their constitution, certainly prescribes that the state should afford education to every child in the state, so this is a constitutional issue, but I don't believe that it says explicitly that they have to go to a specific school within a particular range of their home. And so school choice, school vouchers, and the ability for parents to make that choice is going all the way back to one of those initial questions, and that is families should be able to have the freedom to make the best choice for their children. at any given point in time in their development.
So that was my final question, and what a great conversation. Thank you, Mr. Dippel. We're just here again with Tom Dippel. Thank you for giving us the opportunity for the good folks of Senate District 41 and the Catholic voters in this area to get to know you. And good luck in the remainder of your campaign.
My pleasure. God bless.
Thank you.